All right. Good evening, everyone. Let's folks see they're streaming in here. I think we should have a good group tonight. We'll be talking about excuse me, talking about PSAT scores. I lose my voice in the first 10 seconds. My name is Matt Kiesner. I'm an instructional designer here. I help write the curriculum and make good tests, make good books for students and such. So we'll be talking about this, and know that not everyone's going to have their PSAT scores yet. They're going to be doing 3 batches this year. First batch is out. Um, another batch comes out tomorrow, and then a week from there. So everyone will have their PSAT scores, before Thanksgiving and stuff. All right, let me get this go. There we go. So as always, at Appruth, our why says, you change student self beliefs, you change their lives and stuff that we do. We'll be talking about test prep stuff here, but we also handle academic tutoring for a variety of subjects. And we also do executive function coaching, which is helping with kind of study skills and planning and the things that help academic success kind of throughout. But tonight we're going to talk about the PSAT scores. I understand the score report. I can give you some information on what those numbers mean and where you can improve. I'll also talk about like how this fits into the general college admissions process, and some of the alternatives in there. And then we'll talk about next steps, and we can do some questions. There is a Q&A that you can access if you want to ask a question, and we'll go through those at the end. But feel free to throw them in as the idea comes into your head. All right, so it's gonna start off with the score report, and it's gonna tell you, what they deem as college prep readiness, right? And are you on track to be ready for SAT scores and for college? So you can get those scores from 2 ways. If you gave your a cell or a phone number to when you signed up, you can get this big feature mobile app, which is their new a shiny toy, which if you played with it, it have access to your scores. Also, it's very much like lots of information on colleges. You can search for, I want to major in this thing. What colleges in my state offer it, and things like that. You'll have your PSA scores integrated, but you also can access them by just going to your College Board account. Once they're released, and there'll be a PDF version of those as well. A third option is that your counselors like your school will receive all the scores, so you could also ask them. But there's definitely ways to self-service on that. So you're gonna get the score report, and so for juniors, it's going to be the PSAT/NMSQT. If you are in 10th grade, it'll just be the PSAT 10. It's the same test. If you're in 8th or 9th, welcome. You're early, but it'll be the PSAT 9. Um, and so this will give you some details of it, but if you've seen the score report, it's not intuitive, and it's not straightforward in how and like what they're actually telling you. And I can one of my goals tonight is to sort of help explain how to understand this better, but also explain why there have these limitations in information. So in kind of in a broad sense here, you're gonna if you this is based on the PDF version of it. It will look a little bit differently on the website, but I decided to just go with the PDF on there because it has like most of the information on the page. So you have your scores here, and so it's the total score, and it's based on the scale from 320 to 1520. And we'll talk about in a second why it's that way. And then it's split evenly between reading and writing and math, and so you add these two numbers up, you get the total. They're also providing percentiles, and so what's interesting about these percentiles is that these are for students that took it from the last 3 years. Um, so the that's going to be last year was the first year they went digital, and so then the preceding year from that would have been like a very different test, where they changed um, on there. So they are all uh, these scores are not all the digital tests. Is what I'm trying to say. these percentiles and all the digital, or not, it's two digital administrations and one paper old different version of it. So it'll be kind of interesting to see when next year, not that it matters for anyone here per se, um, but to see what if how it will change um, on that. So I'm already seeing some good questions in the chat. I'll try to answer them as they come naturally. But if not, I will definitely do a Q&A on there. I uh, appreciate the interest on there. Um, so there is a vertical scaling on this. So there's a PSAT 8 and 9, which has a lower score. So if you did take that, that test is like, it is a little bit shorter. It's definitely far fewer math concepts. And like compared to apples, it is an easier test. And it's kind of its own thing. It's not terribly popular, but some middle schools apply it, and some will do that. They will also sometimes have um, the ninth graders take the PSAT, but at the 10th grade level. Um, so um, we have the PSAT 10, and then so these are the same tests. It's just for the national merit only. Even if you got a perfect score in your PSAT in sophomore year, the only thing you could do uh, is take the national, like would be the national merit. You'd have to do it in your junior year. Then that's what that distinction is. And so but this is kind of a spectrum as you're adding content. And so that the SAT is out of 800 per section or 1600 total. And the reason that they're capping your score at 1520 um, is saying that that even if you took the SAT, they believe that you did as well as you did on the PSAT. You got a perfect score on 1520, then you would only get a 1520 on the SAT. Now, obviously, that's not going to be true for all students because if someone's great at the stuff, then they'll probably be able to make that. But this has been it's been a conceit that the College Board's been using for a while now, and so we just kind of have to roll with it. Like that's um, they're limiting things, and we'll talk about what that additional content is on some later slides. So here's the whole total score report. Um, And so we already went over this column on the left, right? So we got the percentiles and stuff on that. The and then there are these 8 content domains. And so we have a reading and writing ones, and then we have these bars. And of the four bars on this, and then about the relative percentage, and they're not very exact on this. And then likewise in math. And then on the right here is for national merit. On there. And so I've got slides that kind of explain all this stuff, but just kind of give you like this is what like the official PSAT score report looks like. And you might be asking where's this 187 number coming from? I got you. We'll get there. So on these knowledge and skill domains, is that they they do not tell you how many questions you missed. So I see someone asking about like, hey, how many questions did I miss if I got a certain score? They're intentionally making this unknown. There's reasons for that is for several reasons, is that per each module there are 2 questions that are experimental and they do not count. And not knowing what those questions are, you can't say that, oh, if you missed 2 questions, therefore you get the score. But more importantly is that they're using item response theory in the scoring, and so certain questions are worth more than other questions. And they're basically, your score really isn't like, oh, if you get 1 wrong, you get this score, and if you get 2 wrong, you get this score. It's actually something where like it's thinking about it more holistically, and they're like, well, how guessable was this question? How much um, content knowledge would you need? And they're kind of building these things to like it, it's very much an algorithmic thinking on the back end. So they gets you to someone asked a question about if you got a 740, how many questions did you miss? Probably I would guess maybe 1, 2, 3. Let's say like that's a really good score, 740 out of 760. Um, and so it's because I was asking about that. I mean, it's a good score, but and unfortunately we cannot quantify exactly how many that was because we don't know the experimental questions, and they're not providing that feedback. Because if you got a 740, you probably got it where all of these bars are filled in. Um, and that might be frustrating if you're looking at your score. Uh, but that's also because these bars aren't representative of how many questions you missed. They're representative of content areas that you may be missing. And so this thought slide kind of continues what I was saying. So it's item response theory, and so you're not going to get any feedback about how many questions you got right or wrong. And I recognize that that is annoying as a test taker, and definitely different than uh, other testing environments and other kinds of tests. But this is how the digital PSAT and the SAT work. There's also the issue that they are is someone's asking to test adaptive. Yes, you're taking a module each, and so you take the first reading and writing module, and then it says that if you're doing it if you did well in that first module, you'll go to a harder module for the second reading and writing. If you didn't do as well, you will go to the lower module, and that's obviously going to cap your score. But the they're not providing feedback on that. Like, there's no notice that it never said in there, oh, which module did I get? You like we can make some inferences. Like, obviously, if the scores are really high in one section, then yeah, I'm sure you got to the harder module. If the scores are low, and like well below, probably below 500 per section, you probably went to the easier module. So all this kind of like stuff on the back end is happening, and it's confusing, and it's like, and I know enough about it to recognize that this it's hard to understand. And I know enough to know that, like, to think in a classic linear scale where where you miss one question, you lose 10 points. You miss two questions, you lose 20 points. That's just not the case on there, and we just kind of have to accept it for what it is on there because getting it, like, I know a little bit how they build it and stuff, and it's pretty nuts, and it's the kind of thing where um, I would not be worrying about it as a test taker. Nothing in that would be oh, like, you must be like, don't try to game the algorithm on here or anything, or try to which questions you get right or wrong is really wrong-headed in this because um there's these different metrics. It's like it's product based versus sum based. It's pretty nuts. And there's still unknowns that like the college board hasn't been completely transparent about, right? They've given some information, but there's still more on there. Yeah, so you get fewer questions and a shorter test, but you don't get, like, that's the cool thing. You did, like, compared to PSATs from years past, you don't have to take as many questions, but the part of it is you don't get the feedback. Kind of the trade-off, but there's no alternative at this point. Okay, so let's talk a little about the national merit, right? So if you're in the 11th grade, um, the you're eligible for national merit recognition. And so this thing is national merit scholarship qualifying test is what that all that terrible acronym stands for. And it partners, so the college board partners with the national merit to provide this. So only juniors. So if you did great on if you're a sophomore, awesome. Like, and you should definitely try harder, to try your best for um the for your junior, because that's when it's going to count, right? Um, so they're saying about 60,500 of the top APC performers are selected. That is based on states. That it's about the top 1% per state. And so different states are going to have different cutoffs on there. They can range, there's like states that are harder to get into, of Massachusetts, New Jersey, California. There's states that are easier: Wyoming, Arkansas, Alaska. And there's a lot of states in the middle. So there is a range on there. Before everyone asks me, I please don't make me recite or look up all 50 states and territories and private and boarding schools, which are their own category. If you're curious, you can find out the cutoff for last year's test, but not this year. They don't release the cutoffs until like they just like last month released the cutoffs for the 2023 test on there. Um, so the and then some of the kids are going to get weeded out, and then there's a gradual process. It's multiple things that you have to do um, on there. The that takes a while before you actually get down to the to this. And um, someone asked me, like, do you know immediately if you qualify for national merit? No. Like I had a student who did that I tutored, who did really well on the last year's PSAT. Um, and uh, let's see, I'm like I'm gonna check my message here. I'm gonna, because it's a good question. Um, on there, 'cause I didn't hear back until he didn't hear back until September. On there, and he was a lock. Like his score was very good, and well above his state. He's in Ohio. Um, so no, like you're not gonna, if you got even a good score, great. But yeah, you're like, he didn't hear back till September. The test he took of October, the preceding the previous year. Um, so it's a yeah. And what they're going to do is they're going to contact the school, and then typically the counselors contact the families on there. That tends to be the process. Because there are going to be extra things you have to get some recommendations. You have to take an SAT to prove that like it wasn't a fluke score or something. All these kind of things. And so you get the scores. Now here this is craziness. So National Merit and College Board, and I've heard this from the College Board specifically. Like a private webinar, is that they don't tell National Merit what to do with the PSAT scores. And because they did change this test. So the National Merit decided not to change it. And I'm going to go off on a little bit of history here. So currently it's you double your reading and writing score, and you add your math, and then you divide by 10. And if you're just scratching your head, like, why are they doing this? It goes from, there was a version of the PSAT that was last implemented in like 2014, where there was a reading section, a separate writing section, and a math section, and the National Merit locked in on that, and so they've kept it where they kept reading and writing separate. Now in the digital SAT and PSAT, there's no reading and writing subscores. So previously, they were like, on the previous version of the test, there was at least like half of it was reading, half of it was writing, and the writing, which is the grammar, isn't really like um, anything close to 50% of of like the test questions. So it's completely skewed right now. And what the reason they did it is that it allowed them to say that the range is from 48 to 228 across like multiple testings. Um, the um, these are like so it lets them have continuity, but it weights the reading and writing more than the math, which as I'm definitely a reading writing person. It's the stuff that I write, but I would have to say that probably math is more important for a lot of career fields and a very STEM based economy. And is this really what we need? Um, no, not really, no. But it is what it is. I'm if someone did really well on the math, but is weaker on the reading and writing, unfortunately, the National Merit's going to punish them. Um, and I'm just the bearer of bad news, and I'm trying to explain it the best I can, but I don't necessarily agree with it. Um, on there. There also, like, you can be in commended, which is like, commended means no money, but it is also, it's a nice thing to have on college applications. It does look good. Um, and if your scores were nowhere close to national merit for your state, it's fine. You're in the pool with 99% of the other juniors in your state. And like the national merit, it is a nice gold star. And if you do it all the way through, you do get a little bit of money, though the size of that scholarship is kind of comically small by the cost of most universities. However, a lot of universities will offer additional merit-based scholarships and stuff. But If you didn't hit it, like you're fine. Like, you can still get into college and have a great experience and still get scholarships and all these other things. It's just this is, a a s- a unique circumstance. You had one opportunity to qualify for it. And if you didn't, it's fine. It's not like, I would not let it bother you in any sense. Okay. So we'll be talking about um the content domain of these. So well, I'm going to go through like those 8 bars, and um, if you have missing bars, you can kind of say, okay, this is where I need to put um, my intention on there. So the first one is like I'm doing it in the order of not necessarily of the score report, but of the test. So the first part of the test is craft and structure. So the kinds of questions you have in there, you have words and context. These are literally vocab questions. It's where the test starts. Is like which word fits in and who makes the most logic. There's text structure and purpose. These are like what is this sentence doing, or what is the overall structure or purpose of the text. Um, and then there's gonna be one cross text connections question, like literally one per test, and that's just two authors in a comparison. So if you're missing some bars on this section, one thing would be, it would be improved range of vocabulary. There's the vocabulary is not very intense, but there are certain kind of frequent words that do show up on this. I've been building out a vocab list. I got 1,000 examples of digital SAT and PSAT ones now. Thanks mostly to Reddit. Um, so the um, so the also working on logic clues, and then so that's like words of like looking for conjunctions of like but, yet, however, and so trying to like follow the passage that'll help with both words and context and text structure and purpose, and then also like thinking about overall structure and summarizing like what is the point of the writing on there. Um, so um, for the information and ideas is the next section. So these are like the more kind of classic reading comprehension questions. So central ideas and details are like is just a straight up reading question, like what's the main idea, or like what information can you learn from this passage. Command evidence, there's two different types. So the textual is where they give you a passage and there's a claim. You have to pick basically an example that supports that claim. So it could be literally lines from like a poem, where they're saying like a certain this poem is about a certain topic and then which line proves it, or it could be like a scientist did the research. What evidence would actually prove their hypothesis? And then command evidence quantitative is like dealing with graphs. There's going to be a couple questions dealing with a bar graph or a line graph or something like that. And then the last of these is inference, and this is where like you're literally completing the last sentence of the passage. So it's very much about logic. So things to improve on, like the same thing of summarizing goals and claims of a text, like thinking about what the main idea of one of these texts is. Um, evaluating evidence support claims, so like thinking about does this evidence support this, yes or no, right? You're reading graphs and tables, so they're not terribly um complicated, but just to understand like what a horizontal axis is probably the independent variable, and then the vertical axis is the dependent variable. And then understanding inferences, like how synthesizing information to pull those together. And the next one is so standard English conventions. This is grammar. So there's two categories. There's boundaries, which is going to be about clauses and punctuations, of commas, semicolons, that kind of thing, making sure that we have independent clauses working on there. And then form structure and sentence is kind of a catch-all category. So it's going to definitely deal with verbs, dealing with pronouns and making sure they match their antecedents and their nouns. Working with apostrophes, making sure that the apostrophes are in the correct place, and then misplaced modifiers, which is like descriptive phrases, making sure they're modifying the correct noun and not like something that doesn't make sense. So if you need to improve this one, definitely reviewing rules of grammar, like knowing like how all the punctuation works, knowing the rules with apostrophes, knowing like, and then working in different kinds of clauses on there. I mean, one thing is really to make sure to read full context, and these things, and not just focus on the blank. And then because if the one thing that when they test is like subject and verbs, they like putting a lot of words in between, and so that it's not going to be the noun right in front of the blank, and you pick the verb. It's going to be the noun that is subject is like quite a few words away. And the last part is expression of ideas. It's not necessarily harder. It's dealing with transition words. So like, what should you use? However, or furthermore, or nevertheless. And then rhetorical synthesis, which if you've taken this test, it's like these weird bullet point ones where you're synthesizing information. Um, so obviously understanding like transition words and like they will use some weird ones. So like making sure the vocabulary is good on that of like your subsequently's and more than and moreover, things like that. Looking for logic clues within the text, right? Besides, so you have to do these ideas before and after, do they support each other or do they contrast? For the rhetorical synthesis, you really got to focus in on what the question's asking. The questions are very specific, and you really like the kind of the cheat on that is if you on these rhetorical synthesis questions, if you really focus on what's asking, you don't really need to read the whole bulleted list. So a little extra strategy there. And then also maintaining proper time management because this is the last part of the test, and so you might have a low score because you didn't have time for it, right? And so one thing on the reading, especially on the second module, which tends to be the harder module, if you're running out of time on these, it's something where uh, it can really like you could get these questions right, but maybe it was the information idea section that was slowing you down. Um, so it's better to like keep good time management. There's a flag for review feature in Blue Book. So rather than if you're stuck on some like a hard reading question about a poem, flag it for review, and then keep moving forward so that you can make sure to get these questions. And then we'll move into the math ones. So algebra is basically algebra one skill. So it's like single variable equations, linear equations, linear functions. Um, so your basic algebra stuff. So if you're having trouble on this one, you want to review linear equations, make sure that you're good about like finding slope, rules of parallel and perpendicular lines. Always like writing down steps, like especially if you're dealing with algebraic solving. Making sure to use Desmos. So if you're dealing with linear equations, maybe you can just graph them, right? And just see like a system of equations. You just see you graph a system of equations where the lines touch. That's the solution. And then I think always double checking that you answer the question asked. Like that's um like the best strategy for all math is making sure you answer what they ask because the wrong answers are oftentimes things that are also true. All right, and then we got advanced math. So this is getting into a lot of algebra 2 skills. Like doing more polynomials, graphing parabolas, um, and also a lot of exponential modeling, which is that's where the variable is the exponent. So certainly make sure you do parabolic equations in the different forms, understanding standard form versus vertex versus a factored form, um, and make sure that you know the difference between a factor and a solution for a polynomial. The factor is going to be typically um, um, a uh, a binomial, and then the solutions are going to be just what would make that binomial equal zero. Desmos is going to be really helpful for a lot of these, just putting them in graphing them, and always double check the question asked. I see someone commented what I said. Um, so someone asked like, well, if you flag for review, how can you do this? Because it's a progressive test. There's a exact answer there because obviously, if it was um that what you're saying, why would they have a flag for review, right? So you go into a module and you can in that module you can answer any question. You can start with the last question and work backwards if you choose. Um, because that module is locked. So what you're describing is called linear adaptive, and there are tests like that. A lot of like tests like post college tests where you answer a question and if you get it right, you get a harder question, and if you answer it wrong, you get an easier question. That's not what the SAT is or the PSAT is doing. So they give you a module, you can work freely in it. And so it's called section adapted. And after you finish that module, then it'll take you to an easier or harder module on there. So that's why the two modules for the reading and writing and two modules for math. So there's not like a worry about having it where like, oh, you broke the system or something. You can definitely flag for review. You can definitely move around in that module. Um, you like when you take it that you can't, you have the time limit for that module, then you go on to the next one. Obviously, you can't return to the previous module. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, keep asking questions. 'Cause I'm happy to explain how the section adaptive modules work. All right, there's gonna be probably data analysis. These are gonna be a fewer questions as dealing with different averages and all of its senses, and dealing with percentages and probability, and also study design. And study design is like, does the study make sense? What additional information would we need for it to to be conclusive, or what can we deduce from it? Um, so Desmos can do stats. You can do mean and median and all kinds of stuff in there. And also does percentages really well. You can literally type in 20%, and then it'll put it of, and then you can put the number, and like you actually don't even convert it to decimals. It's wild. Um, but also read the question carefully. The difference between if it's 20% off, are we looking for the savings or the what we paid, right? And not mixing those ideas up. But, write down your work and stuff, and then double check. I'm always gonna say that. Um, so the And then geometry and trig. So it's 2D geometry, 3D geometry, and trigonometry. The trig is just going to be just basically understanding what SOHCAHTOA is, and nothing beyond that. Maybe a little bit of radiance, but I think that's very unlikely to be on the PSAT. What's important on this is that they give you formulas. It's in they call it reference, and the symbol is x squared, which doesn't really look like it's going to be geometry, but and there's all the classic geometry formulas you can use. So people will be taking they asked about a volume of a cone. I don't know that formula, and the answer is like you don't need to know that formula. They gave it to you. Certainly we're just reviewing like your basic SOHCAHTOA trig. It's good, and then the normal stuff. Read questions carefully, write down work. Um, if you're looking for like improving on the hardest stuff, they do tend to like proportional shapes, so like similar triangles and that kind of thing. All right, so how does all this fit into to the college mission stuff? So we're gonna get a little more, okay, you've done this, you can hopefully understand your score and make a game plan, and then how we can move on from there. So how important is PSD? For most students, it's not very important at all. It's an indicator. I mean, the P definitely stands for practice. If you get into national merit, then it matters, and things are going well. Um, but like it is for most students, it's going to be something. Um, um, so um, the kind of the setup on there, um, the but it's something where excuse me, hear me. Um, you know, they're very similar in structure and stuff. So you can kind of take the PSA scores and say, okay, uh, by and large, that's where you will where you will score. So again, the PSAT is very similar to the SAT. The same structure, same number of questions, the same 4 modules, same question types. They both on Blue Book. The difference is that there are some there's definitely there's some math that will not be on the PSAT. Graphing circles, some advanced factoring with higher order polynomials. Um, but even those don't show up in large quantities on the SAT. Like they would be like 1 or 2 questions. And then they haven't quantified this, but definitely I would say that like from practice, I'd say the vocab is easier on the PSAT than on the SAT. And there might be like, maybe not the hardest reading passage, but again, it's harder to quantify. That's kind of more anecdotal. I definitely have had students, say that, oh, like the PSAT was easier than the SAT, having taken like the October test. All right, so then there's also the ACT, right? The ACT does not have it does not have a popular like PSAT equivalent, but it's still a valid test. And so it's important to say that the PSAT has moved away from the ACT. I put a but there, so if you're like, wait, I know, like that's the next slide, right? But all this stuff is still true. So the SAT and PSAT have like short reading passages where the ACT has longer passages. They're like multiple questions, about 800 words. There's only a few grammar rules tested. AC's got a lot more grammar rules. I would say that their questions are easier, but there's more questions and more rules. So this, the SAT focuses on algebra and graphing skills. ACT covers a wide range of math and goes well into pre-calculus. Now you might say, well, the SAT sounds really, really easy. The SAT is the questions, even though they're like on just on algebra, I think they are tougher questions than you see on the ACT. The ACT like asks more topics, but a lot of those topics essentially boil down to, do you know what this is? Have you seen this before? Can you figure out what that is? SEs is that digitally adaptive testing experience again, where you're in a module and then your second module will be harder or easier depending on how you did. The AC has a science section and also an optional essay. And it is a longer test right now. One thing on AC is paper based, so some people students just like that experience and being able to write on their graphs and stuff, and that works good. All right, but the ACD is changing. Um, but it's just gradually. So we're just gonna get a little weird here for a second. I'm on the cutting edge of this, but I have to be honest of like there's I have a lot of questions myself. All right, so the ACT is going to change. This may affect current juniors, but maybe not. If you're a sophomore, then you will probably only take this new version of the test. So, in April, if you take the ACT on a computer, which is an option, so the paper test it will be the same. You can take a practice ACT, and it will be that test on April. But if you choose to sign up for a computer-based test for the ACT, and you have the they'll have a location that has the computer and a location they'll have the paper. Like so, it'll be very clear which one you're signing up for. Will be a redesigned ACT. The biggest change is that the science section has become awful, or become it's always been awful. Becomes optional. I was starting thinking my brain was like the science section is awful, which is my opinion. But the it is now optional because it seems that the ACT recognizes that it's not a very good section. That's again my opinion. Obviously they probably disagree. But for those of you who have not had any ACT experience, the science section is like they give you a science experiment, you have to make deductions on it. But it's very much not based on science. It's mostly like a reading and like number inference. And so the science section will be optional. Will schools still require the science section? I have no idea, but probably not is be my guess. I don't think any schools, even like I would expect, even some pretty good tech schools to be like to bow out on it. That's again not that is my opinion. I may be wrong. Um, and then there will also be fewer English, math, and reading questions. So the test is getting shorter. In there, and a little bit more time per question because a lot of students have struggled with ACT timing. So, in September, so in the fall, this redesigned test will become the norm. And so you could still take it on a computer, or the paper test will be this where it would be an optional science section. Very little is known about this. I mean they've published like what the template will be, but they have not given a practice test. So I would for those testing in the spring on AC, I wouldn't really recommend jumping into that computer-based test in April, because it's going to be an unknown. And you may also not have like it may be hard to even find a seat for it. Honestly, I don't know how widespread it's going to be. There's also no way to practice it. I would certainly love them to release a practice test so I could, update our materials. But um, that's the honest answer. Because that's like my project of for the next year. Um, um, but there's a advantage taking AC in the sophomore. I mean, if I would say probably no. But the uh the ACT would be I mean, if you want to really want to take the longer test and have to take the science section, I guess sure. But very few students, unless like you're in a specific case where maybe it's a sports thing or something, if you need to need to test early. Most students are not going to test until like at least the beginning of a junior year. So if you're a sophomore, I would probably plan for like taking that new redesign test. It sounds like it will be easier. Just know that you should hang tight because um, I don't think it's we're not gonna have information for it until at least next year. So trying to decide between these things, um, you can definitely use your PSAT scores to kind of just determine like how you sit with the SAT, right? Because obviously there's the top end it's capped at 1520, but like if you're getting a 1520 on PSAT or something similar to that, you should probably just take the SAT because it seems like you're doing pretty well with that. Alternatively, you can take a practice ACT. And for someone asks, yes, we can definitely get you set up with a practice ACT and get a full score report on that. And then kind of look at there is a conversion chart on there. The um, the the ACT they're keeping they've kept the conversion even though they're both well one test has changed, the other test is changing. They're kind of in this sort of like they've agreed that their scores scale is not changing, and so that's just been that way. So um a lot of students are going to score pretty equally, and this is just something I've seen. Um, so like if you're, if you have one is more, if it's 70 SAT points or more, because the ACT is on a different scale. If you, it's from 1 to 36, and then it is an average of the different um, sections. There is a concordance table that you can use on there. So typically you go towards the SAT because there's just more variance. There's more degrees. But I think at the end of the day, it's like if you try both, if there's one that you prefer more than the other, then do that. You know, um, because most students are going to be pretty similar in their scores. All right, so talk about how these all kind of connect with admissions. So we got our quantitative components, right? So you get your high school GPA and all those things with that, and you're also like your which are the kind of classes you've taken, right? How many APs have you taken, that kind of stuff. Um, and then an SAT or ACT test as set up. And then there's all the qualitative ones. You do your college essays and recommendations, and then anything else kind of in your resume on there. So these are both important. Obviously, there's been questions about the importance of SAT and ACT. I mean, definitely there are schools where it is less than important. It is not something they consider. University of California system being the biggest part of that. But a lot of schools have gone towards at least where they will consider the test, right? Like where testing is optional. And a lot of like many of the toughest schools in the nation have gone test mandatory. And that seems to be where things swing. The SAT is and the ACT are good at comparing kids from different places because it like other rather than worrying about how like what is an A at one school versus an A at another school, just saying like, well, this kid got a 28 on the ACT, this other kid got a 32 on the ACT, and making that comparison um, on there. So it is swinging back, but obviously check with your schools, any schools you're looking at applying to, and find out what their admission standards are, because I can't speak to all all colleges in there. But it's saying that like it's no longer regional. It used to be the SAT was the coast and the ACT was the center of the country. If they accept one, they accept the other. Is the honest answer on that. So you have to worry about, well, I'm applying to this school. Do they prefer SAT over ACT? You don't have to worry about that anymore. So as I said it to one person's comment, it's typically a junior year activity. So if sometimes sophomores will need it for like, I know some schools will use PSAT scores again, the AP classes or honors classes. That's a very school dependent thing, and if you're if you hear me going, huh, well, that's because you don't go to that school. But you might need it for certain things, including like if you're looking for a D1 scholarship, academic scholarship, and they can start talking to you at July 1st, you might have to take it early. Those are relatively atypical things. Um, but a lot of students start testing in fall of junior year, which is kind of where we're at. And if you're in advanced classes and you've already like if you've already taken Algebra 2 for SAT, then you're good to proceed. If you're currently taking Algebra 2, uh, probably spring is going to be better, a better testing timeline for you. The hard part about it is the ACT, because ACT is pre-calculus, and so some students are gonna be taking pre-calculus in junior, but that's already like an advanced math lane. Um, and if you're already taking calculus, that's awesome. You're doing great. None of those ideas are on this test, but obviously, kudos for you for taking hard math. Um, but you try to think about what makes sense. There's not a timeline for all students. It's also important that to take multiple tests. Unlike the PSAT, you only take it once. You should plan for multiple testing on there. There's super scoring potential. The ACT loves super scoring on there, and they kind of push it. A lot of schools accept the SAT scoring, and I realize I'm talking inside talk. So what's super scoring is a good question. Super scoring is where like you took the SAT twice. You got a reading writing score and a math score, and one testing your reading writing score was higher, and then the other one your math score was higher, but your reading writing was lower. You could take the best scores from either section. Um, but also like you'll do better. Like the more times you do something, it feels easier. This is not my first time doing a presentation, so I'm not stressed out about it. But if my first time, I would probably be more stressed out. Um, so most students should probably test twice and maybe plan for a third. I wouldn't recommend doing more than three, unless you're like at that point it should be you're a senior and you just got to get a couple points because it really would like change your outcome of things, right? Or like apply to a state scholarship or something. But the good news is like tons of times to take this. On there. So we're at October, or no, we're at November. Things are so we've already done the SAT. So there's a December ACT and SAT, like they're not on the same date there. Though I mean, immediately that would be like unless you got a great PSAT score. I mean, I would probably wait till March, but hey, rush in there. So there's good opportunities. Likewise with June, there is you can take the SAT and the ACT. They're not on the same day. They're sequential Saturday. So it's kind of spaced out on there. And then when it wraps around, it would be August, and you're going to be rising senior, and there's still you could test definitely up until the October test, maybe in December, depending on what kind of school you're going to. And so there might be some different timelines on there. Of sometimes people test they prep in the summer because they have the time, and then they take take the test later, right? There's test in the winter, and then starting in spring and then go into summer. These different options on these the I don't know why they this slide. I can't remember why there's an SCT on this Jan Feb test, this winter prep. Usually students focus on one test over the other, and that's fine. I don't think most students need to take both the SAT and ACT. Certainly no colleges require it. I do know some school counselors think that's a good idea. Um, to me, it seems a little old-fashioned, but it is what it is. And also, like in-school testing has become more popular. They've one of the things that the digital SAT has done is made it easy for schools to offer in-school testing. So this is typically in the spring for your schools, though not necessarily. I think the SAT now has a testing season basically from like March to April that you can have a spring test. And so see if your school's offering it. Like more schools to offer than you would think. And nice thing about school day testing is that like your school will pay for it or give you like a severely discounted version of it. You don't you don't ruin a Saturday, and it counts just like any other national test. Like so, there's no asterisk next to it or anything. So you want to register it like so everything SC is done in the College Board, and you go through that, and then everything AC is its own thing. So you need that. So they are separate companies. It is Coke versus Pepsi, really at its core. So don't go to the College Board and try to register for the ACT. You need to make an account for each of them. And also we should talk about accommodations. So that if a student has LDs or other reasons for something, they do offer this. So the nice thing about the SCT, and this is really the College Board, is once you get accommodations, like you're locked. You'll get them for the PSAT, the SCT, and any AP exams. You don't have to reapply. So it's actually really kind of a nice system. And that could involve, time and a half, having a quiet testing room, or more than time and a half, really. Um, and the and so would you typically do this through a counselor at your school? ACT, a lot of kids want extended time on ACT because it is a fast test. So they are a little stingier with it, where you have to apply per ACT. And I'm not saying you won't get it, but they are like you do have to kind of like prove that you've been using it in school, and it's just a little bit harder on there. So and then this last line of here is that like sometimes you're like, well, I don't want to take with accommodations because schools will think less of me. Um, that's not the case. These are medically uh, uh, diagnosed combinations. They are part of health privacy rights, and so um, it won't be like they cannot use it. They can't tell you that you had that you're given it because it cannot be used for in discriminatory practices, and so already like there's nothing to worry about in that way. And then also when you're looking colleges, like make sure that you're thinking about what's realistic. Very few schools will uh, um, uh, it started where like you have to get the top score or something. Um, so like part of it is you think of kind of like a bar graph. So here's like it's like a box and box plot or box and whiskers graph. So you kind of you want to be in this middle 50. On there. The top 25% like kids that are of top scores, those are the kids who are getting into every school, and there's like they're the strange kids who want to apply to every school in the nation and get into all of them or something. You're not really competing with that kid. That kid's kind of a weirdo, no offense. Uh, but like the top 25 are probably didn't even go to that school. Like they like that was their safety, or they just did it for whatever reason. And you definitely don't want to be thinking about the bottom because like that's like getting into students who are there to play sports, or some other like you know their dad was the dean or something. So you're not really competing against them either, right? Um, and then I would strongly recommend taking a practice test. So if you take it with Ruth here, we have all kinds of analytics in here of and we will tell you how many you got right or wrong on any of these tests, and can tell you what you're missing there. So you get a nice little score report, and it can kind of help build a plan. Um, so the all right, so what do we do on here? Well, obviously, if you're in 11th grade, it's like, hey, let's talk about what would make sense in terms of test prep on there. Um, and we do offer some small group classes. They're capped in pretty low numbers. I think it might be 8 students on there. So like it's not a class of 50 kids. You'll have there's proctored practice tests. You get all the materials. We got some real great books. Our SAT materials are completely updated to the digital SAT. Our ACT materials will be updated to the ACT test once we know that. And we also have like our own self-paced stuff. So we have lots of great lessons for SAT and ACT on there. And then we also do private tutoring. So this would be working with a tutor matched needs and it can go at the pace of the student, right? So if they need only a couple of sessions for review, they can do that. Or if someone who wants to go low and slow, do it that way too. So we got a poll just launched up if you could answer that. And then one thing I know we have some students and families that are for younger. If you're wanting to get started, we do have a foundations thing for ST and AC prep, which is based on like the core skills you needed. It's designed for 9th and 10th graders who want to like get the process started and go at like a reasonable pace. So kind of recommend about 8 tutors. It's not eight tutoring hours, not 8 tutors. So that would be a little intense on there. So that's the stuff we do. I know I got some questions here. I'm gonna leave above this. So if you wanna reach out, you can take you can use this QR code on there. I'm gonna leave that for a second. I do see I have not gotten to everyone's questions, so let me do that. If you still have questions, throw them in here and we'll chat it out. So an interesting question here. So the student starts off weak, but would have ended strong. Does the new algorithm cap the possible score because of how they answered the first few questions? So part of it is just like how you did in the module on there. And so is when you're saying start off week, like you're talking like in the module, or was the first module week? Because um there is a if you miss the first couple questions, it doesn't mean that you're doomed and that like you can't do better. But if you are missing most of the questions in the first module, is you're going to go towards the lower module. And the lower module isn't doom. Like we've run we've seen that you can get a 650 and hit the lower module. But like if you're missing up questions to get to the lower module, I mean, you're not getting a perfect score. I mean, like that's already gone by. So I wouldn't. I mean, I think it should be relatively balanced. But if you're doing poorly early on, I mean, you're doing poorly. So you know, I think the lower module is should be seen as the lower second module is an opportunity to show what you know, and to earn points back. Is not meant to be a punishment. On there. So is it true that students in the same school in the same day have different questions for the PhD? Okay, I like that question. Um, mm, yes and no. I mean, they're having gone on the Reddit and looked at the PhD forums. There's clearly kids taking the same, essentially the same version of the test because they're talking about the same questions, and they'll say, "Hey, was that passage about Venus flytraps? What was the answer?" And so obviously they've seen the same passage. Now, the College Board pushes it at saying that everyone gets a unique test form. Now there are some ways of doing some randomization of terms of like, like I wouldn't say, oh, everyone's answered B is the correct answer for number two, because maybe they're shuffling the answer choices, right? And that's like kind of the easiest version of that. There also seem to be like sometimes that they'll actually change the numbers or the variables in math. But by and large, it's basically the same test experience. Now, part of this is kind of they want to get around cheating, but honestly, you only can see one question at a time on Blue Book, so trying to cheat is pretty difficult because it's like you have to be on the same question even if you're looking at it. Um, so that's kind of how they've answered that. Um, but it's been kind of like I think it's not as unique as they have promised it to be because I mean you can go on Reddit and look on the r/SAT and kids are all talking about the same test they took. So you know that's what even but I don't know if that means that number 17 the answer is C, number 18 the answer is D for all students. Someone asked about do colleges give merit scholarship money to commended students? Maybe. That's I wouldn't say no because there's a lot of merit based aid that like is it's not just a single thing, but also you have to have a certain GPA or something other a certain number of AP classes or something. So um that's something like where as you research colleges on there and probably that big features app could help you on that more than me because there's a lot of colleges here and to be realistic my job is to be good at tests and like help students be better at this testing stuff. um there are counselors that can figure out what's going to be the best college for you for in terms of all things both finances and life happiness and future career prospects, but that really isn't my area of expertise. And so got another question here. So with ACT changing, if my son takes ACT before April, and then with opting out of the writing section, we'll score some super. Okay. So the writing section is optional right now, and should anyone take the ACT writing? No, no colleges require it. It is they sell it. Is the best way to think about it on there. Um, so it makes money for them. So the issue is going to be like when they see like they're going to they're going to make the science section optional. And in terms of super scoring, that means that so currently the ACT has four scores: English, math, reading, science, and then they're averaged, and then you get a composite. It's a real basic average round up. If it's 0.5 or greater, they're just going to do an average out of three. And so it's going to be the English, math, and reading section. Um, and so I think if you take it with the science, it would be, you know, it would there's no way it's going to hurt anyone. Like they're not going to make it to where like you have a weirder average, because I think it's going to happen. It's going to be quite a few students are going to be in that way. But I don't think that they're going to be dropping the science scores from previous administrations. Like they're not going to say science is now optional. The ACT loves super scoring. Um, they're very big on it. So um, they do push that on there. So I think they're going to make it easy enough on there. All right, well, we did an hour. Hopefully you learned some stuff. I think I've cleared the board of questions. I appreciate everyone's feedback in there, and I hope you learned a few things, and good luck on your post PSAT stats. Y'all have a good night.